Okay, so we're going to start by going over last night's homework, which was the bottom of page 43 and 44. Hopefully you were able to ace this one after going through them yesterday and the day before. We are just about done with the chapter. We are going to have a test either on Monday or Tuesday next week. I'll probably let you know tomorrow once I see how far everybody gets throughout the day. So let's go start from the beginning here on the bottom of page 43. You should have had a wind direction from the northeast at 20 knots, 75% cloud cover, 988 millibars, falling barometric tendency of 0.5 millibars, precipitation of 2 inches, temperature of 50, dew point of 45, drizzle, and visibility was 3/4 of a mile. Make sure you know where to get all these labels. So degrees Fahrenheit, miles, etc. That's right off of the bottom of page 13. With the next one, we have southeast, 15 knots, 25%, 1024.6 millibars. Make sure you unabbreviated the pressure. I do not want the 3-digit code there. I want the whole thing. It is rising 1.4 millibars. There is no precipitation listed. 85 degrees, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no present weather, and the visibility they don't put there. So I did just put not applicable, but you could have also put clear or full. Either one works. Wind direction northwest at 10 knots, 100% cloudy, 998.5 millibars, falling 2 millibars, 0.5 inches, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 67 degrees Fahrenheit, 67 degrees Fahrenheit, fog, and an 1/8 of a mile visibility. How would you do on that? Is there anything that we need to cover? Okay, drawing them, I heard a few. Oh, wait, actually, let's go back. Quick review concept here. Which one is most likely experiencing precipitation or about to? One all the way on the right. Now somebody else tell me why. What's close together? Okay, it's not the humidity, it's the dew point, but you're right. So you know the concept, just make sure you use the right words because this will be a test question. And if I was a betting woman, I would bet that it will be on the Regents when you take the Regents in June. Let's see. I think that's about all I wanted. Oh, by the way, for this one, I said that was a whole feather because I didn't have anything to compare it to. If you thought this one was going 5 knots, that would have been fine too. On the Regents, they will never just put a single half feather because you have to have something to compare it to decide if it's a half or a whole, you know what I mean? Like you can't tell if it's a half if there's only one of them there. So I don't think the Regents would ever give you just a half a feather. All right, for drawing them, you would start with the circle, decide how much of the circle to fill in. Again, notice no labels. This does not say 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Even the little circle for degrees would mark this wrong. This fraction, this does have to be a fraction. So if you put 1.25 there, I would have to mark that wrong. On a side note, I don't think they would ever use the 0.125 or an 1/8 as a fraction. They keep it to stuff you know, like a quarter, you guys know is 0.25. You know the halves, and you know 0.75 is 3/4. So I don't think they'd ever do an 1/8. Again, the wind stick has to come out of the southwest corner. It doesn't matter if that one feather goes up or the one feather goes down, as long as you just have one. Any questions on drawing it? Just copy this right off of the key. So always just look at the key to see where to put everything. And oh, don't forget to in this case, you have to abbreviate. You took the pressure of 975.6, dropped the 9, dropped the decimal, and got 756. If you had put the 975.6, I'd have to mark it wrong. I know it's dumb, but it is what it is. And then here is the last one. Any questions on those? All right, if you got no questions, we are actually going to do the very last concept we have in this chapter, and then everything else is review. The only thing we have not talked about is on page 39, and that is the fronts. But actually, let's quickly go back to 38 so that we just review a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday. So this was the notes that we did yesterday, so Tuesday. We talked about how air masses are these large regions of air that move around the earth. And these large pieces of air have consistent temperature and pressures, air temperature and humidity inside them. So they're like giant, I think of them almost as thought bubbles over a cartoon character, where they're just giant hunks of air that are moving around Earth. We, off the reference table, which is on the bottom of 13, we see the symbol, so how they're abbreviated, what that abbreviation means, and then we talked about the type of weather that goes with it. And just a quick review, anytime you see the word continental, that means the air mass was formed over a continent and it's going to be dry because continents don't have that much water. Anytime you see the abbreviation M, that stands for maritime, and maritime always refers to water. So if an air mass forms over water, it's clearly going to be wet. Then moving on, we talked about polar comes from the polar regions, so they're cold. Tropical comes from the tropical areas, so they're warm. And like I mentioned yesterday, please don't confuse tropical with wet. So don't think tropical rainforest. Just think of tropical temperatures. The M and the C tell us if they're wet or dry. The P and the T tell us if they're warm or cold. And then finally, the A for Arctic, that's extra cold. Then we looked at the map, and the first thing you have to do is make sure you're able to label each one of these. So did I put labels? Yep. So if it forms over the water in a warm area, it's an MT. Then, so the two MTs are labeled down there. Then I labeled the two MPs. So those are cold and wet. Then moving on with the continental polar, then the continental tropical. I think we did label that one at the very top CA. Either one is fine. Actually, now that I read the directions said CP. It didn't give us a CA. So that's why we did that wrong. So how this works is we're going to move this into today's activities. So we're going to be talking about weather fronts. You guys have heard of fronts before, right? You've listened to the news report at least once in your life, right? If you heard the phrase cold front, you heard the phrase warm front, and I'm guessing you know the gist of what it means if a cold front's coming. It's going to be cold. And if a warm front is coming, it's going to be warm. So you know the gist of it. So what I want to make sure you understand is where that warm and cold fronts are. So on this map, we see air masses. And just like I said, this is like a giant thought bubble. So this CP right here is like a giant hunk of cold air that's existing right there. Now that cold air is going to move around the earth, just like we said yesterday. It's going to come towards Buffalo. And because it's a cold air, when that front passes through, or when that air mass starts moving, it's going to be called a front. And so let me actually take this back a second. Have you learned about fronts in any other class? Not even talking science-y. Has any teacher used the phrase front before? Hence they have. Huh? Yeah, you do. I'm not talking about weather. How about that? What'd you say? What did you say? Front. Front, like front. F-R-O-N-T. How about in social studies? You've heard it in social studies. You have. Do you know when? You think of when you've heard it. It's not, I'm not talking about weather. Yeah, I'm talking about wars. Jonah, what do you know about the fronts in a war? It's the battlefield. So in World War I, you guys know about trench warfare, right? The trenches, the fronts, what's happening at the front? Jonah says it's the battlefield. Basically, you got team one, team two, so side one and side two of the war. And the front is where they're actually fighting. It's the dangerous spots. It's the yuckiest place of the battle. The front is where the deaths are occurring and this doesn't necessarily apply to today's warfare, but back in World War I, II, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. I mean, what was it? Which war was it when they literally, the Revolutionary War, right? When they literally lined up, you got the redcoats and you got the rebels and they're literally just shooting each other on the line. That's the front. So it's where the two armies are meeting. So let's talk about a weather front now. How can we relate that to this, you think? It's where the air masses are colliding. So we had these multiple air masses on the board where they start to meet. So this part is called an air front. I'm sorry, let me take that back. These are called air masses. Where air masses meet or collide, that's going to be the front. And what do you think happens when they collide? It's similar to a battle. What do you think? How can weather ever be considered like a battle? How about this? During the fighting, we got all the fighting happening at the fronts where they're meeting. What's going on behind the front? How safe are you back there if you're in that part? You're safer than in the front. That's where they would put all the medical teams. It's safer behind the front. So what happens with the weather front? Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's get these notes in. Top of page 39. 2 bullets at the, well, actually 1 bullet at the top. It's the boundary between 2 air masses. And then ESRT page 13. So put that in at the very top of 39. So when you have an army and you have the front, you've got the actual fighting happening here. And let's say we have Army A over here. This is where all the deaths are occurring, and then this is just where the rest of Army A is. When we have a weather front, where they're colliding is going to be similar. Right where they meet at the front, that's going to be kind of messy. We have a front moving in today. It's kind of messy. But after a front passes, it's usually a little calmer. Just like here's the front for the war, it's usually a little calmer behind it. There's a little more to it, but that's the basics of it. You've already heard of a warm and a cold front here. You may even recognize these from a weather map. So the cold front has triangles on it. The warm front has half circles on it. This reminds me of icicles for a cold and sunshines for a warm. Again, don't need to memorize that because it's right there, but I do remember it that way. Then here's 2 fronts you've never heard of before, I'm guessing. A stationary front and an occluded front. And you notice those are a mixture of the half circles and the triangles. One thing I will tell you is some regions questions are as simple as they put this line. So they put a line that's triangles and half circles. And they ask you what front that is. What kind of front is this one that I just drew? See, I heard 2 answers. Stationary and occluded. This is exactly what they expect you to do. You just glance at this and you see a mixture of triangles and half circles. And especially since stationary is first, you're like, oh, that's a mixture of triangles and half circles. So a lot of people pick that. So again, I know there's no actual words here to read, but similar to when I say read all the words, look at all the details on the picture. I have legit seen that question pop up over and over and over again. What is this? And people get it wrong by calling it a stationary. This one is an example of an occluded. So that's as simple as some of these questions might be. But of course, it's not going to be that easy. One other thing that you might have to do, and you'll see these 4 pictures on the next 2 pages. So you have this exact picture in your notes on page 39. This is what it looks like when a cold front comes through. So first of all, we see this on a weather map. So you see these not half triangles, these are full triangles. And do you see, did I add that arrow to yours? What do you think that means, this arrow? That means where it's going. What do you notice about where it's going and the triangles? They're in the same direction. These triangles point, and same with the half circles, they always point in the direction the front's moving. So if they're on a map, it's like, to me, it's like they're pointing at the people they're about to come and get. So that's how they're shown on a weather map. Here's what the arrow looks like. And here's what we need to add to our notes. So we're going to add these. So first we'll say cold air is located behind the front. And this is similar to the phrasing used in war. You have the front and the people behind that front. So if it is the United States Army at the front, you've got where the battle is happening and behind them. So where I have Army A here, here's the front, and behind that is the army that goes with it. So here too, a cold front is going to have cold air behind it. So if it's going this way, where it's going to the right, this whole section here on the left behind the way it's going is going to be cold air. Cold air hits warm air. What do you guys know? Where is the warm air going to go if cold air is forcing its way through? Where does warm air always go? Warm air. Warm air has to go up. So when these two meet, cold air is going to hit some warm air. That warm air is going to get forced up. Warm air always goes up. So cold air pushes the warm, moist air up. So second bullet, and if you didn't already label this cold air up here, do that too. I think I actually labeled that now, warm air. Yep, so that other one's labeled warm air. Anytime you see one of these, and they're not labeled, you always know that the warm air is the arrows up because warm air always goes up. And we know that when warm air, keep going here, the greater the difference in temperature. So if we have really cold air pushing out fairly warm air, that's going to most likely produce a storm. You guys have seen, especially like in the winter when we have random warm days and they're pushed out by a cold day, there's usually a windy storm that hits. In the summer, when we have a cold front moving through and it's pushing out the warm air, this is usually when we get thunderstorms. So there are 2 more bullets. I'm not sure if you guys can see the bottom one. Cold fronts usually pass by pretty quickly. And they bring cooler but clearer weather. So once a cold front passes through, the actual storm is only for a little bit, but it will bring with it decently nice but cool weather. And again, we do want to label that weather map symbol. So in the back of the arrows, is going to be the cold air, and it's pushing the warm air out of the way. So this is a lot of information, but I'll tell you what you need to be able to do for the regions. You need to be identify which side is the cold air, which side is the warm air. And again, warm air always goes up. So that's how you can tell on this one that the warm air is the arrows going up. And over here, remember, they're going, pointing in the direction they're going. So the cold air is in the back and it's pushing the warm air out. All right, for the warm front, it's a similar situation, except for we got the half circles. And again, you can label these very easily by the arrows going up are always the warm air. So warm air is always going to be, for a warm front, warm air is located behind the front. I'll put these all up there. So you will have to be able to identify this as a warm front because the warm air is pushing the cold air. And how do you tell it's which one is which? The warm air always goes up. Warm fronts, they do take a little bit longer to pass. So they're a little bit slower, but they tend to bring warmer but rainier weather. So again, they're always pointing in the direction they're going. So the warm air is always in the back, bringing the warm air, pushing out the cold air.
Is that kind of cool? That's kind of cool right now. It's more clear outside.
Yeah, but we were working and we are working. It's not really clear. I would not have called, it's not raining currently, but it's definitely 100% cloudy right now.
This angle I can see more of the sky.
Yeah, you do have to see that even though it does look pretty blue, it actually is almost so blue it's gray out there. You can see out in the distance we have some bluer skies, but we are going to say, if you had to say, is it cloudy or clear right now, you'd be saying it is cloudy. We do have predicted rain pretty much all day. And it is going to be warmer tomorrow, so that does mean a warm front is pushing through, yes. All right, everybody got this page? Again, what will you have to do? If you see the pictures, you're going to have to be able to identify the pictures. By pictures, I mean these ones I had at the top. You have to be able to identify which one is a warm front, which one is a cold front. And you can always tell by if the warm air is going up and the warm air is in the back, like this one, it's a warm front. So you can tell by which one's doing the pushing. And you can always label them because on both pictures, so there's the warm front, here's the cold front, warm air is going up. So you label them first, and whichever one's doing the bullying or doing the pushing is the front that's coming through. Now for the next two, I have not seen many questions other than what kind of front is this by looking at the pictures. But basically for these other two, you need to know they exist and be able to look at their symbol and tell me which one it is. An occluded front is a little different. It occurs when one cold air mass overtakes another warm air mass and then grabs another cold air mass in the meantime. So it's basically one really fast moving cold front that overtakes two other fronts. So precipitation is possible, but not definite. And there will be a slight temperature change. Basically, this is when we have rainy days for a couple of days. Again, I've never seen a question asked other than look at that symbol and tell me which one it is. I don't think it's super important you know those 3 bullets off the top of your head. Everybody good? All right, and the last one, like I said, also, so stationary, I didn't even include a picture here. So stationary front, so you can just put right under where it says stationary. And we're on page 40. There is no picture, so you only have these 3 bullets. Stationary, based on its name, stationary. It's not moving. So there's no arrows to show direction. Winds blow in opposite direction. It's like a stalemate, meaning both sides are equal and no one's winning. Clouds can last for days. So to get those 3 bullets, that's, well, we just have to do fronts are associated with, and we're done with this chapter.
What about chapter 9?
We do 9 and but this one has a part 2.
How long is part 2?
I'm not, the part 2 will be a little bit shorter. So maybe 2-ish, maybe 3 weeks. Then we have chapter 8 and chapter 9, and then we're done. All right, now fronts are usually associated with, what is one thing you can pull out? Every time a front goes through, what's one thing that's gonna happen? Temperature's gonna change. We're gonna usually have some clouds, some rain, a change in temperature, possibly a change in wind direction. Get these 4 bullets and you can start your homework, which is we're into review. We're kind of pulling it all together. We're going to do pages 45 through 47, numbers 1 through 23. So I know it sounds, because it's 3 pages, it sounds like a lot. It's 23 very short answer questions. And you have the rest of the period. I don't want to see anybody doing nothing. You all have something to do. So I would like to see you working for the remainder of the period.